if you write, you're a writer. You don't have to write every day. You don't have to publish what you write. But I mean, if you write, that's what makes somebody a writer, right? Like that's what you have to do to call yourself a writer.
Ashley Cowger is the author of two short story collections, On the Plus Side, printed by Galileo Press, and Peter Never Came, winner of the Autumn House Press Fiction Prize. Their fiction and creative nonfiction have appeared in several literary journals, and they work as an associate teaching professor at Penn State Harrisburg, where they teach courses in creative writing, composition, and literature. They live in Lingelstown, Pennsylvania with their son, husband, cats, and K-Sound.
I don't think there are people who are born to create and people who are not born to create. I think it's just something that's in us as humans. We are creators. Like we are all creative. We all have imaginations. We're all inspired by things.
In this episode, we're exploring the realities of being a writer, from finding your voice and developing meaningful creative habits to navigating growth, feedback, and the writing process itself. If writing is part of your life or something you've always wanted to pursue, then this conversation is for you. Ashley, welcome to the show. So excited to have you with us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's dive right in. You're the author of On the Plus Side and Peter Never Came. How did you come up with On the Plus Side and Peter Never Came? I mean, those are really interesting titles. I just want to know the story behind that.
Yeah, Peter Never Came. The title is from the title of one of the short stories in the collection.
Mhm.
And that story is about Peter Pan. It's a first person narrative where the narrator like longed for Peter Pan to come and take her to Never Neverland, and he never showed up. So, and that's kind of the whole collection is organized into two parts. One part is about children, and then the second part is about adults. And so that's kind of the thread that sort of runs through the whole thing is that Peter Pan doesn't show up, he doesn't take you away. You do grow up, and then you kind of learn what that means, and how to kind of process adulthood.
And On the Plus Side, tell us a little bit more about the title.
On the plus side, that title took us so long to come to. I had, I think, like three or four different titles that I was playing around with for that collection. Different titles that, like, I thought would kind of comment on the theme that was running throughout the collection. And there kept being issues with the title from my editor. Like, once it was accepted for publication and we were kind of finalizing things, it was like, Googling the different titles I was pitching. And he was like, no, we can't use that title because that's the name of a popular song from like an indie rock band. And you can't use that title because it's this. And you can't use that title because it's that. He was trying to find a title, which I appreciate that he had the kind of business sense to consider this. He was trying to find a title that would both match the stories in the collection, but would also be something that you could Google and you wouldn't find a million different hits for things that were not the book.
Mhm.
So he ended up actually finally, I was kind of at a loss. I was like, I don't know what else we could name this. And he was like, well, this one of the stories in particular deals with pros and cons. The perspective is from somebody who studied economics in college, and she's weighing the cost. She's doing like a cost benefit analysis of whether to stay with her boyfriend, and whether to have a child with him. And so he said, well, that if you think about it, like the whole book is kind of about like exploring the costs versus the benefits of like human relationships, and how we what we give to each other, what we take away from each other, how we can decide when a relationship has turned sour and it's not serving us anymore. And ultimately there's a lot of kind of sad stories in the collection.
Mhm.
And so he thought it would be sort of almost like ironic to call it On the Plus Side, to sort of focus on the positive when actually a lot of the stories delve into some of the negatives of human relationships and kind of some of the ways that we drag each other down without meaning
Mhm.
to sometimes.
Yeah, I love the story of finding the title. That's so funny and seeing the plus side. Relationships are coming up as a theme. Peter Pan,
Mhm.
yeah, he never comes back.
Yeah.
And you have to learn, you have to grow up. And then you have
Yeah.
human behavior. What drew you to these themes for your work? Is there inspiration behind them?
That's a really good question. I think for me, it's definitely something that I kind of am preoccupied with in life. I'm very, I'm always very concerned with what I'm offering to the people that are in my life, and how we're interacting with each other, how we can kind of make our lives better for being in each other's lives. um, and I've noticed a lot, like I think all writers are keen observers and they pay a lot of attention to the things around them and the people around them. And I've just noticed a lot of sort of um, wrong relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but just people who are dragging each other down, who are like in toxic feedback loops with each other. And I always think it's interesting. We tend to have this sort of hallmark approach to human relationships where it's like we're all good for each other. We should all like have as many friends as you possibly can, and hold your friends close no matter what they do to you, be loyal to each other. And I do think there are times where there are people you need to cut loose from your life, and there are relationships that are doing more harm than good. And so it's something that I've always been very interested in this. Like, even, when I was much, much younger, I was always very fascinated by the way we interact with each other as human beings, and what what we can take away from those interactions, and kind of how to kind of gauge whether they're good for us, whether these relationships are actually ones that belong in our lives.
Oh, absolutely. There's something that you mentioned that just made me smile. Hallmark approach. Because I just remember those Hallmark shows, right? And
Yeah.
think about those types of relationships and how people stay in toxic relationships. And
Mhm.
I just, human behavior is fascinating. And I love that that's something that comes up in your work. How has, because I'm curious with social media, I think before, I
Mhm.
know many years ago, I didn't have social media, so I didn't see all the stories. I didn't know about narcissism as much. I didn't know the labels and toxic relationships, only what you would hear based on stories your friends share with you. How much
Yeah.
does social media influence the work that you do and your fascination with human interaction?
I've had like a love-hate relationship with social media over like the span of my adult years, where social media was a thing.
Hmm.
Um, and I always found it really fascinating, but there were definitely um, times where I felt like it was harming me, like it was harming my mental health to be, especially Twitter and Facebook were two that I ended up just canceling. Like, I closed my accounts, I deleted everything. I lost a lot of photos and videos that I had posted on my Facebook, which is unfortunate.
Oh,
My son is always like, that used to be on your Facebook. And I was like, I know, but I deleted it like 4 years ago. And I guess I lost all those. I didn't think of backing them up. But, that other than that, I've never looked back. Um, I definitely felt like I got sort of sucked into that endless scroll,
mhm.
and doom scrolling, especially where you're just like you're just kind of looking at the drama and the toxic comments people are making to each other, and you're just getting dragged down by it.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's fascinating to me, and I think it's definitely fed into my writing, my stories. But there was a point where I couldn't even do it anymore, and I quit. I quit those platforms. I'm on Instagram. That's the only thing I really do anymore.
Yes, Instagram, the famous Instagram. Yeah, and I think it's fascinating. It's for just to study everything. Everything pops up on my feed. I have no idea of like from NASA to
Yeah.
the extreme, like the other end of that spectrum. So I think it is
Mhm.
interesting. Were you always a writer? Did you always consider yourself a writer?
I think I did. I started like daydreaming about being a writer when I was in elementary school, probably like second or third grade, really young. I remember I started writing a novel. I was writing a fantasy novel. And I wasn't even that big of a fantasy novel reader. I don't know why I decided to write a fantasy novel. I think I just thought that that's what people write as fantasy novels. Like those were super popular at the time. I think they're still very popular. So I was like, I'm gonna write one, and then I'm gonna like become a writer. And I'm sure it was. I mean, I know it was terrible. Even at the time, I think I kind of knew. Um, but I just I don't know. I just wanted to do it. I wanted to write stories, and then later on, I started realizing like, oh well, maybe I should actually write stories that I think are interesting and that are the kind of stories that I would want to read, and then that's where I really kind of came into my own as a writer.
That's fascinating. Tell us a little bit about the idea or dream of wanting to become a writer to actually stepping into that role. What did that look like for you?
Um, so when I was in second grade, I wrote a poem for like a contest, a school-wide contest.
Mhm.
And I remember I didn't even win the contest, but I got honorable mention. And that from that moment on, I was like, well, I'm a writer. Like I just like to me, that was okay, I'm a writer. And I knew I wrote a bunch of really bad poetry as a elementary school kid, but then like I knew I kind of wanted to write stories. And so that's when, I just started writing stories instead. And they were all terrible for a very, very, very long time.
Mhm.
But I think one thing that really helped me was that like, there was never a time, I know I hear a lot of writers talk about that. Almost like embarrassment at calling themselves a writer, or they'll call themselves like, I'm a wannabe writer or I'm an aspiring writer. And
Mhm.
that never was an issue for me. I was always like, I'm a writer, like I just am. And I think that's what everybody should do.
Mhm.
But I never had an issue with just calling myself a writer and just believing that I was a writer.
Oh, oh, that's, yes, that is interesting because a lot of writers, I mean, aside from feeling worthy enough or good enough, like what you put down on paper, is it good enough to even go to print? But having that belief, that undeniable
Yeah.
belief in yourself as a writer is incredible. You mentioned that, you had terrible writing. So many of us fall
Mhm.
into terrible. How did you keep going to hone your craft?
I think I just kept going because I liked it. Like, I thought it was fun. And I don't think I'm sure I would have given up if I had gotten too hung up on if it was good or not. Like, I would have realized it was bad and then been like, "Oh, I guess I'm not a writer," and stopped. But I was
Right.
just like, "No, I like writing, like, it's fun." I could get I have ADHD, which I actually think is kind of a benefit for me as a writer because, I'll be in a situation where I struggle to focus on things that I probably should be focusing on sometimes, but my mind will go off on some story that I'm working on, and I'll just like I can fixate on that, and I can focus on that for hours on end. Um, and I think it's like the flow state, right? They call it the flow state where you're just in it, and it's super enjoyable to be in that flow state. Um, and so for me, that's what like I always wrote because I just loved the feeling of sitting there and writing. Like it was so enjoyable to me. And I just didn't think about whether it was good or not until much later. Like until I started thinking about trying to get published. That's when I suddenly started getting hung up on, oh, well, wait, is this actually any good? And then I would be, frozen in like feelings of inadequacy and like, oh well, this isn't as good as what other people are doing. But for a long time, for like well into my 20s, I just wrote because I just loved the act of writing. Like I just enjoyed it so much.
Oh, loving the act of writing. I know so many writers love the idea of writing, but the actual physical act of writing you enjoyed. Do you
Mhm.
prefer pen and paper or do you prefer to type?
I am a big typer. When I was probably like 13 or 14, my dad gave me his old hand-me-down word processor. It was like a cross between a computer and a typewriter.
Mhm.
So it it had word processing capabilities, but it didn't have like all the other bells and whistles that a computer would have. It was just like you could just write documents on it. That's all you could do. And so I started using that and kind of never looked back. Like I've always I think there's something in my brain that's so used to then typing the words that when I do try to write with pen and paper, because I do try sometimes, like if you're blocked or something, it's a good idea to try something different. Um, it doesn't come as easily to me though. Like I get into that flow state much better if I'm typing. And I think it's just because I'm used to it. I've been doing it for so long that that's the signal for my brain. When I open up a document and I start typing, my brain is like, okay, it's writing time. Like, let's do this.
Oh. Oh, that is great. So it's a prompt. It's a trigger.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
wow, I find that interesting because I don't know, I sit down with pen and paper and nothing comes.
Mhm.
Do you
Me
have a
too.
consistent time when you sit down? You mentioned being in the flow. What is that
Yes.
like? Does it
I I
writer's
have
block?
to write I have to write in the morning. If I don't write in the morning, I it doesn't happen for me. Like my brain cannot I feel like my brain decreases in functionality as the day goes on. But also, I mean, I'm a parent, so things are just going to inevitably happen throughout the day where things are just going to require my attention. I'm not going to have the time, and even if I can grab some time, like, oh, there's an hour, my kids at rehearsal for some new play or whatever, I can't get my mind to focus on it if it's not first thing in the morning.
Mm,
So, I absolutely I have like a ritual where every morning I get up, I make myself my coffee. I read for a little bit because I like sitting there on the couch and having my coffee and reading. I do a gratitude journal, and then I look at my to-do list for the day and just sort of double check what's going on that day. And then I'll do my morning pages from the Artist Way from Julia Cameron. And then in my morning pages, I'll brainstorm what I'm going to write for that day. So I'll think about like, where did I leave off yesterday? What was I working on? Oh yeah. Okay. So today I'm going to pick that up, and here's what's going to happen in the next scene or whatever. And I'll like brainstorm it. And it's terrible. It's like it's almost like bullet points of like, oh, maybe this will happen. And then so and so will say this and then blah, blah, blah. But it just sort of warms me up. It primes me so that then when I finish my morning pages, I open up my computer and open up that document, and I'm ready to go.
oh my goodness. I love the fact that you shared your ritual. And something said, ask you about morning pages. I'm not consistent. I'm inconsistent with morning pages. Do you consistently?
Yes, I do them
No,
every
yeah, mine
morning.
have to. My morning pages happen at night.
You know what? I
Interesting.
think it doesn't matter what time of day they happen. I know Julia Cameron is like in the Artist Way. It's like it has to be like first thing in the morning, and I'm sure that that works for a lot of people, and that works for me. But I don't think that's going to work for everybody. I think different people are going to have to figure out when it would fit into their schedule, and I think people should do their pages before they write. Like if you're a writer, you should do your pages before you write, because it gives you the chance to write in a low stakes way and sort of get warmed up, and then you can go work on the actual project that like is meaningful to you, that like you actually care if it's good or not.
Mhm.
But and so I think people should figure out, okay, what time of day do I write best? When does my brain want to write? And then I'll do my morning pages right before then, or
Mm.
my pages we would call it, I guess.
Pages, yes, yes. Okay, such great advice. I really love that. And I'm going to try. I'm going to try to really be consistent with my pages. And I like that. If I'm going to say morning pages, I won't feel as
Mhm.
bad. There's no shame.
Yeah.
And speaking of morning pages and the idea of the artist state and being inspired, like pouring into yourself and craft, You mentioned that
Mhm.
you are reading, it's a part of your ritual. What's the
Yeah.
inspiration behind your work? Authors that you read frequently, or is there any
Oh gosh.
inspires you?
I read so widely. Like I'm kind of one of those readers who just if it's published, I'm probably interested in it. Um I read a lot of literary fiction, which is mostly what I write, but I'm not opposed to fantasy. I like science fiction. I kind of like everything. And I feel like as writers, we can sort of take things from everything that we write, even when it's not the genre we usually work in. There's a lot of kind of just exciting inspiration that you can stumble upon when you're reading somebody else's work. And even sometimes, you know, I'll read something and I don't love it, but then I'll sometimes ask, like, I'll investigate. So, what is it about this that I'm not vibing with? And what can I learn from that? You know,
Mhm.
like, why is this not drawing me in? And like, how can I avoid making writing in that way if this is something that just doesn't appeal to me? Um, and that's not to say like I don't think anything is ever bad, right? Like it's just like I personally didn't love it. And I want to always write things that I personally love, that I would want to read myself.
Yeah. So, a couple of things. The questions you ask yourself when you don't like the body of work. As a writer, I know that as writers, we read, we improve our craft through reading.
Mhm.
What additional questions would you ask yourself as you're reading so that you can improve?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, it has to do with looking at my areas of weakness, like the areas where I feel like I need help with, and then I'll focus on that when I'm reading and kind of analyze, like, okay, so what is this author doing that I could learn from? Like, how is this different from something I would have written, and what can I take away from that, from this, the choices this author made? Um, for me, I've always been a strong believer in my own like sentence level writing. I think to a fault sometimes where I'm like, when I'm revising, I'll be like, but that's so well written. I can't cut that. Even if it's like, no, it needs to go. It's not serving the story. But I'll be like, yeah, but listen to the poetry of the sentences or whatever. So I tend to, when I'm reading, I'm much more focused on like, how are these elements of plot fitting together? Like, how's the cause effect relationship of the plot happening? What are what's driving these characters? What's their like deep need that then is realized or definitively not realized by the end of the story? You know, I'm really looking at that stuff because those are the things that I think I'm weaker at. And I really want to learn from those writers who are strong at it, that are really like have those elements of craft down.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. What have been some of the challenges or doubts you've had to work through?
When once I started trying to get published, and I realized how hard it is to get published, I started really kind of doubting myself as a writer. That's really when it came in for me, where I was like, should I call myself a writer? Am I a writer? Like, what makes somebody a writer? Um, and I think, you know, now I've landed on like, if you write, you're a writer. You know, you don't have to write every day. You don't have to publish what you write. But I mean, if you write, that's what makes somebody a writer, right? Like that's what you have to do to call yourself a writer. But you know, there is still value in like taking feedback that the world is offering you and like learning from what other readers are saying about your work or what editors are saying about your work. Or if you're just getting a lot of silence, like trying to figure out why that's happening, why it's just form rejections, you know, and you're not getting any personal feedback or anything. But so for me, it was really hard when I first started getting rejections. And I was like, oh, this isn't just going to be easy. Like, I'm not like, the world isn't just going to embrace me and be like, this is a literary genius. You know, welcome to the literary world or whatever. Like it's just that's not the way it works.
Mm,
Um, you just everybody gets rejected and everybody gets rejected a lot. And it can be really disheartening if you're not prepared for that. I mean, even when you are prepared for it, it can still be disheartening. I still sometimes I'll send out something that I think is really strong and then I'll get like a form rejection and it'll sting. I'll be like, "What? Really? You don't like that?" But you don't know. I mean, sometimes there is work that's strong that still gets rejected. And there is work that needs further revision that gets rejected. And I think the hardest part is figuring out which it is and then
Mhm.
figuring out what what you want to do next, how you want to take that feedback that the world sent you and then modify the piece. Or if you want to, say, "No, I think this is good. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to try someone else."
Mhm. Oh, such valid points, right? When your work gets rejected, I know I have a pile of rejection letters,
Yeah.
an inbox full of rejection letters, but you just keep going in that belief
Yeah.
in yourself and just improving craft.
Mhm.
So your work spans both fiction and creative nonfiction. How do you decide which form a story wants to take?
I love that question because they both come from my observations and my, life experiences, right? Like everything that I write could be written in either form. Um, I think there's just for me, there's a distancing when I write it as fiction where I'm like, "Oh, I saw this thing or this, something, I was thinking about something or whatever, or I heard about this thing that happened to this person." And um, for whatever reason, I want to distance myself from it. I don't want to be part of the story, you know? And I write a lot more fiction than nonfiction, I think, because there is some part of me that wants to distance myself from these stories,
Mhm.
um, for whatever reason. Who knows where that comes from? But for nonfiction, I think there are certain stories that are so personal that it's like this is about me, and this is about my relationship with my family or whatever. And I can't take myself out of it. Like if I tried, I would end up in it anyway. I would just end up writing a character that is essentially just me. And that's when it's like, okay, this needs to be nonfiction then. Like as much as I would want to not be part of the story, I am, and I have to just accept that. So I'll write it as nonfiction then.
Oh, that's interesting because I'm thinking back to advice I received and I've read so many years ago that when you're starting off writing, write based on what you know, even though it's fiction.
Mhm.
Look at people in your environment, change the names to protect the guilty. But really sourcing from your experience and
Yeah.
a lot of your work, even though you change the names, it's a part of you. And
Yeah, right. Because if you have an idea,
Mhm.
you had that idea for some reason. There's something about you and the way you see the world and what you're interested in that caused that idea to come to you. And so, really, everything you are a part of every story. Even if you heavily fictionalize it, there's some kernel in there, there's some seed that is you. And that's where the whole story kind of bloomed from.
When you think about on the plus side, what did that project teach you as a writer?
I feel like I leveled up as a writer when I was working on that collection. I actually, I spent, I don't even know how many years, probably like 7 or 8 years working on the stories in the collection. And then I decided it was ready and I wanted to start sending it out. And it was getting some interest. I think it was like it earned like honorable mention or something in a contest, and some editors were giving me positive feedback, but it was getting rejected. Like nobody was sort of accepting it and saying like, "Yes, we will publish this, we'll add it to our publication schedule." um, and I got this really amazing rejection from Barrett Warner at Galileo Press, and he gave me a ton of feedback. And he told me, I remember he even said something in the email that he sent me, something like, I hope this doesn't irritate you, this feedback that I'm giving you, but like I'm hoping that you'll that you'll appreciate it and that you'll like take it and do something with it. And it was amazing. It was just super useful feedback that was really pinpointing the strengths and weaknesses of the stories in the collection. And he didn't have to do that. I mean, he believed in the collection enough that he wanted to like give me some thoughts on why it wasn't quite working in its current form. So I revised it, and I we kind of ended up sort of developing a relationship, kind of a back and forth. And I asked him later, after, it was probably a couple years later after I had revised it, if I could submit it again. And he said, "Yeah, that's why I gave you all that feedback. I was hoping you would revise it and then submit it again." I was like, "Oh, okay. I didn't I didn't know if that was allowed or not." So I
Mhm.
submitted it again, and it ended up getting accepted for publication. And then we had this amazing relationship where he would send me these lengthy multi-page handwritten letters of feedback for my stories. So he'd send me the story with his like comments, but he would also write these full letters handwritten, talking about the story and like what he was doing when he was reading it, and what it got him thinking about, and like where he thinks it needs to go deeper, and how it can be reworked to sort of like hit harder and kind of emphasize its strengths. It was just amazing. And I honestly feel like I came out of that experience a stronger writer. It definitely made those stories stronger, but I think it made me a stronger writer just overall. Like everything I write now is better for having been through that experience with an amazing, amazing editor.
That sounds like an amazing experience because a lot of people don't get feedback. And
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about how many rejection letters go out and no one even tells you why it was rejected. Let's talk a little about Peter Never Came because he never came back. So
Mhm.
Peter Never Came won the Autumn House Press Fiction Prize.
Mhm.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What did that recognition mean to you at that point in your career?
That was the moment where, I felt like from that point forward, I've never questioned whether I'm capable as a writer, like whether I'm capable of writing something good. Because it's Autumn House Press is a pretty, impressive press. Like they're, they publish really good stuff. And to win that prize, and that was my first book, so I was a year out of grad school, and I won that prize. And then a year after that, the book came out. And it just, for me, it was like, it was that validation that I had not realized I needed when I was younger. And then really desperately was longing for when I first started trying to get published. It was that kind of signal of like, okay, this is something I can do. Not everything I write is going to be brilliant. I'm gonna still write bad stuff, and some of the drafts are going to go nowhere. And sometimes I'm still gonna, or not sometimes, a lot of times, often I'm still gonna get tons and tons of rejections. But it sort of let me know, like, but you are capable of writing something good. You've done it before, and you can do it again, and you can do it even better. You can just keep getting better.
What an amazing mindset. Powerful. Really. You did it once, you can do it again. And
Yeah.
a huge recognition.
I
Mm.
have a sticker on my computer on my laptop
Mhm.
that says, "I didn't come this far to only come this far." And I always think about that, like, okay, I got a book published, I can get another book published. And then I got another book published. And now I'm like, okay, I can get a third one then. Like I can keep going.
I mindset, really
Yeah.
good mindset. Right.
Hmm.
I love that. I think everyone should have a sticker, a huge
Yep.
poster, because sometimes it's daunting. There's so much disappointment. You want to throw it
Yeah.
out. It's just what a way to stay motivated to keep going. I want to talk a little
Mhm.
bit about your teaching.
Okay.
As a teaching professor, how has working with students shaped or influenced your own writing?
It has had such a huge effect on my writing. I think teaching creative writing levels you up as a creative writer. Um, it's that old. cliche of like the best way to learn something is through teaching it, I think that's 100% true. Because when I'm trying to figure out like how do I teach these students how to write a story, I have to go back to the basics and really think about, well, what does a story need and what elements are non-negotiable and what elements are up to the individual artist. Um, and it requires a lot of reading different craft essays and craft textbooks and things, and kind of constantly investigating like what does a good piece of fiction require, like what makes for a good piece of fiction, and how are the what's the variety of forms a good piece of fiction can take, what are the different choices the person can make, and how can we break the rules, or how can we sort of even argue that there are no set in stone rules. There's just, suggestions that you can take or leave as a writer. So it's teaching it has really made me a stronger writer. And I think also trying to help my students with their revisions, trying to figure out how to give them feedback that's going to be useful and that's going to push them to revise. Because a lot of times students will put together a draft that's pretty good and submit it for workshop, and they'll get tons of feedback, and then they'll be overwhelmed and they'll be like, well, I think it was pretty good to start with though, so I'm just going to like fix the grammar and typos and then I'll call it done. And trying to figure out how to get across to them like, yeah, it's pretty good. It could be a lot better though if you just keep working on it. Like it's not met its potential yet in this first draft stage. Um, and that's been a challenge, but it's also helped me with my revision processes because I really had to think about how do I teach students to revise and how do I teach students like how to take revision seriously, and how do I give feedback that's going to leave room for them to make choices, but also going to help them see like areas where they could strengthen or where they could kind of get back in and do some more work on the piece.
Mhm.
Um, and that's been really helpful for me actually when I'm in the revision stage. I'll usually reach a point where I try to set it aside for a while, and then I'll try to come back at it and put my teacher hat on and say, what would I say? What kind of feedback would I give to this piece if this were one of my students' stories?
Mhm.
And it's hard because it's not like I wrote it, but that's where that distance comes in. If I set it aside for a few weeks or a month or more even, um, then I'm more likely to be able to come at it as a teacher, and then I'll pinpoint things that I maybe wouldn't have noticed otherwise that really need work.
So I'm going to ask you with the revision process, are there any questions, maybe one or two, that you think writers should ask themselves when they're revising or in that stage?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I definitely think endings are super important. I'm a big believer in nailing the landing at the ending. Like if you can get a really strong ending, you can kind of make up for some of the weaker points throughout the story if the ending is really good.
Mhm.
So I always pay a lot of attention to the ending. Is this the right place to end? Is it going on too long? Should it end, a page sooner? Or should it end in some completely other way that I hadn't even thought of in the initial drafts? Um, how do the ending and the beginning interact with each other? I think there should be some sort of meaningful conversation the two are having with each other. That it started here and it ended here. What does that tell us? What does that tell the reader about this character, about this story, and kind of what has been gained or what has been lost or whatever throughout the pages that they've read. So definitely how the ending and the beginning are kind of in conversation with each other is a good question to ask. I think also a big key question is about the character, like your main character. What's driving them? Um, how does the plot interact with their sort of inner need or inner want? Because there should be some sort of interaction between the two. If the
Mhm.
plot has nothing to do with this character's like sort of deep seated needs, then this isn't the right character for this particular plot, and the story isn't going to end up being that interesting. right? Like there has to be some connection between who this person is and what they lack in life, and then what happens in this story. And so looking for that connection, I think, is a really good place to mine your revision.
Mm. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And so I'm going to ask you, when you think about your work, how do you piece all of the components you just mentioned together to create your writing? What does that look like for you?
When In the early draft stage, I'm usually just trying to kind of feel my way in the dark, just figuring it out as I go. In the revision stage is where the magic really happens for me. I'm actually much more of a reviser than a drafter. I love the revision process because things start really coming together in like exciting ways. And you can take this like mess that you sort of threw together in the first draft and pull out the pieces that are really beautiful and then get rid of the rest and then really like make it come together and make it shine, make it look like something um that barely I think resembles the original draft often.
Really?
But for Yeah, definitely. And for me, my revision process tends to be like I'll look at one aspect of the story at a time. I'll try to focus on like, okay, um, this aspect of the character needs work. And so what I'll do when I read through it and I try to decide what I want to work on, I'll make a list of changes that I want to make of aspects of the story that are not working right now. And sometimes it'll be like I'll know exactly what I want to do. And sometimes it'll be like, well, this isn't working, or like blah, blah, blah needs to be deeper, or, whatever. It'll be kind of vague. And so I'll start with the ones where I know what I want to do and I'll focus on those. And then as I go, I'll be able to start getting ideas for the areas where I wasn't super
Hmm.
sure at first. I just knew something wasn't working, but I didn't quite know how to fix it yet. Um, as I go, I'll start being able to tackle those bigger areas of concern. But I try not to look at sentence level issues. I try not to worry about sentence level stuff until the very end. I want to focus more on like character development, plot, cause effect relationship from one scene to the next, and all those other elements of the story, because you never know what's going to get cut. And so I don't
Hmm.
want to spend time agonizing over a sentence and then have that sentence get cut in the next round of revision.
No, yeah, absolutely. It sounds as if you have a very structured process. You're writing lists, you're
Hmm.
plotting even while you're doing your morning pages.
Yep.
Tell us more about how you go from idea, morning pages, to actually writing the story. Do you do an outline, or is it by the seat of your pants, you just write whatever comes?
It's kind of a combination of the 2.
Hmm.
So, some stories I'll just start writing. Like, I'll have a sentence that will come to me, and I'll be like, "I'm gonna write that sentence." And then what's the next sentence gonna be? And I'll just sort of feel my way through it totally with no roadmap. But sometimes I have more of an idea for a character or a story, like a plot. And in those cases, I'll sometimes write like a really bare bones outline, like it's not very detailed at all. um, but it'll just be like sort of like maybe this happens and then this happens and then ultimately this is where we end. And usually the final draft of a story, you can barely even tell that it came from that initial outline. Like things will change so dramatically throughout the revision process that it's not recognizable as the same story, but it gets me going, like it's enough to get me started writing. And really, like I said, for me, the hard part is writing the first draft. That's where I struggle, and that's where I sometimes lack motivation because I'll know like this is not good, and then I have to fight that voice inside my head that's like, you should just stop. This isn't any good. Because I'll be like, okay, but I know this isn't good, but I need to get something down so that then I can look at it and figure out why it's not good, and then I
Mhm.
can make it better.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And it's just so helpful because I know I stare at the screen and I have enough depth. Does this make sense? So I'm all, do I keep going? I want to bring it back full circle to just your teaching. Do you find that some of the things that you're working through are patterns that you've seen in your students?
Yes. In fact, I can give you a example that just happened like last week in my advanced fiction class.
Mhm.
Um, we're working on revisions right now. We're actually workshopping revisions of stories that the students had previously submitted earlier in the semester, and then they're going to have to revise it again as like the final project for the class. So they have to do multiple revisions. Um, but one thing that I noticed was that some of the students have this just beautiful poetic lyrical sentence level writing, and they mentioned during the workshop that they really want to keep that, right? Like they're like, I know like a lot of in my initial workshop you guys said the writing was really strong or it was really poetic or whatever, and I didn't want to lose that during revision. So they'd be like, so I didn't cut this or I didn't change that because the writing was really strong there. And
Mhm.
that's something I struggle with too, right? Where I'm like, oh, but I love the way that sounds. I can't cut that.
Mhm.
But I have to like I have to sort of be the bad guy and say, "You know what though? You do need to cut that because it's not right for this story. It's not serving this story." But here's the sort of glimmer of hope is that what I can tell them is that their writing is beautiful and it's going to be beautiful when they write the next scene, right? When they can cut this scene and replace it with some new scene, the new scene is also going to be beautifully written because they're
Mhm.
good at the sentence level, you know? And so I tried to kind of focus their attention on that and be like, hey, um, you're good at the sentence level and that's awesome and you should be super happy about that. Don't have any issues with cutting good sentences because the
Mhm.
next sentence you write is going to be good too.
How does someone get good with the sentence level or at the sentence level?
I think you just have to read a lot and read very widely and just you internalize it, right? Like and I think that's why really good writers are they always say they read a lot, right? Like they're it's like a universal thing. Good writers all are good readers. And I think that just that happens over time. You just you recognize things that you think are beautiful in different writer sentences, and then you start getting a cadence of your own. And everybody kind of has their own voice as a writer, but you just start to kind of you find your voice and you hone it, and um, it's probably a combination of all the different voices that you've read before that you loved and that all sort of fed into and plus your personality and your own experiences and everything, right? And that just sort of feeds into your own sentence level writing.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. For creatives who may be listening and feeling stuck or unsure, what advice would you give them?
I would say to focus on what draws you to do this creative endeavor to begin with, right? Like, um, what do you like about creating? What what about this art made you want to create it? Made you want to be one of the artists and not just one of the kind of passive viewers or readers or listeners or whatever, you know, whatever the art form is. um, Tapping back into what got you started, what made you want to do it to begin with, I think is really key. And I think the more we remind ourselves that it's a process and that early drafts are not going to be that good, and that's okay. That's true of everybody. And that you can fix these things during revision. You know, you can make it good later on, but the hard part is just turning off that inner editor and just saying, like, okay, right now I need to just create. I'm just going to let whatever comes come, and I'm not going to worry about if it's any good or not, because that happens during the revision stages.
And if you could sit down with your younger self, what would you say? What would you want to tell her?
I think I would warn her that it's gonna be hard. It's that it's gonna be there's gonna be a lot of rejection.
Mhm.
Um, and, you know, you gotta just keep going. You gotta not let those rejections sort of stand in your way, right? You just keep focused on the fact that you love doing it and don't let sort of these lofty dreams of being a published writer or of like being recognized, being validated from some external source. Um, don't let that get in the way of what really is driving you, which is just that you have these ideas, you get inspired by the universe, and like you want to create something. Like just focus on that. Um, Feedback will come eventually, and learning how to take feedback and learning how to let, other people's ideas make you a better writer. That's all important too. But early on, I think the most important thing is to just keep going. I mean, not even early on. I think at every stage, the most important thing is to just keep going, to not
Mm,
give up.
I love that. What's one thing you're really looking forward to in this next chapter of your journey?
I am looking forward to just continually getting better. Um, there are definitely things that I think I could be better at as a writer. Um, there are still things that stories that I write where I'm like, this is the best of my potential right now. Like this is as good as I can make it. But I'd like to believe that in 10 years, I could look back at that same story and be like, "Oh, no, I can make this way better. I can improve this." Um, and I think, like, my second book was better than my first book. I'd like to think my next book will be better than my second book. So that's really the thing. It's just I just wanna just keep improving, keep practicing, keep trying new things, keep learning new techniques, pushing myself, challenging myself to kind of step out of my comfort zone as a writer and do different things.
Wonderful. We've unpacked a lot during the conversation. Is there anything you'd like to share that I haven't asked you?
That's a really good question. Um, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, which I wish I could. I wish I had some like really brilliant final thought. Um, but I'll just say, like, I think we were just talking about, persistence and the importance of just keeping going. And I think everybody can create. I don't think there are people who are born to create and people who are not born to create. I think it's just something that's in us as humans. We are creators. Like we are all creative. We all have imaginations. We're all inspired by things. I think what makes some people more successful on paper than other people is that they just kept going. They just persisted. And so I think that's really key. Like if you are driven to create, just don't ever give up. Don't ever let rejections or negative feedback or anything, don't let that get in the way of your creating things. Um, and don't ever tell yourself that you're not good enough, because we all have it in us to create great things. We just have to keep at it and keep constantly challenging ourselves to improve and get better and better and better.
Powerful last words. Ashley, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. I truly enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you'll join us again.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you left feeling inspired and energized to follow your own path with purpose and creativity. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and keep living your purpose.